quickedit.net.
I'm lazy and I hate stairs, so I use the elevator in my building every day. It never broke down, I never died, not even once. Apparently that makes me one of the lucky ones. I'm Connor from Quick Edit, and today we'll be reviewing 3 cases where elevators tried to murder someone. In April of 2011, an elderly God-fearing woman from Maryland was trapped in an elevator for nearly 4 days. An 85-year-old Catholic nun, Sister Margaret Geary of Notre Dame de Namur in Baltimore, got trapped inside a broken elevator. Her sisters were out of town for a convention, and she was alone in the convent. The elevator broke down to a power failure over the weekend. Geary had gone into the elevator on Friday to retrieve something from a storage room, and that's when the elevator reportedly failed, leaving it inoperable. Most of her sisters and colleagues were gone that weekend, explaining why it took so long for her to be rescued. She tried pushing the inside elevator door, but shockingly that accomplished nothing. She had her cell phone with her, but could never get a signal. This elevator also lacked an emergency call system. In other words, she was stuck in that box until God decided to let her out. But get this, Geary, who reacted to this whole situation a million times better than you or I would, did not freak out. Instead, she turned the potentially fatal situation into her own personal prayer retreat. She told interviewers at CNN that the experience was a gift, claiming to have felt God's presence immediately. Luckily for Margaret, she brought celery sticks and a jar of water with her on the elevator. She carefully rationed the celery, taking only a few bites at a time, and taking tiny sips of water to make it last. When she ran out of water, she resorted to sucking on some cough drops she had to relieve her thirst. After about 80 hours, her sisters finally realized she was missing, eventually hearing her voice and finding her trapped inside. She was rescued without any serious injuries. Geary claims the whole ordeal was an opportunity for a closer relationship with God. Okay, if I were forced to eat celery sticks and cough drops for 3 days, I think I'd rather starve. Sister Geary broke a kneecap around the time of this incident, but she had no choice but to continue using this old, crappy elevator. I hope she brought rations every time she stepped on. Okay, so you're not supposed to use an elevator during a fire, but what are the rules when the building gets hit by a plane? Betty Lou Oliver, a 20-year-old elevator operator, survived a 75-story plunge over 1,000 feet in an elevator in the Empire State Building in New York on July 28, 1945. A nasty chain of events was triggered after a warplane crashed into the building during a particularly severe bout of fog. Lieutenant Colonel William Smith, an experienced World War II pilot, was flying a B-25 bomber from Massachusetts to New York City. As Smith approached LaGuardia Airport, a thick fog descended, reducing visibility to nearly zero. The air traffic controller ordered Smith to land, but he made the decision to carry on unfettered. He thought he was flying on Manhattan's west side, which turned out to be a fatal mistake. The bomber veered off course, colliding with the Empire State Building between the 78th and 80th floors, causing a massive explosion and instantly killing Smith, his crew, and 11 others. This brings us to our hero. Betty Lou Oliver was working the elevator as normal, assisting tourists and employees as they zipped up and down the Empire State Building's 102 floors. Ironically, she planned this to be her last day on the job. When the bomber collided, the crash tore a gaping 18 by 20 hole in the building's facade, and multiple floors went up in flames. Oliver was suddenly and violently thrown from the elevator, suffering multiple serious burns and fractures, including her back, pelvis, and neck. Firefighters and rescue workers scrambled to pull Oliver and other survivors from the wreckage. To everyone's astonishment, Oliver was alive. After receiving emergency first aid, she was placed on a stretcher and loaded into the same elevator she had just been launched from to meet an ambulance waiting at the bottom. What they did not know at that time was that the safety cables to said elevator had been cut when the plane penetrated the elevator shaft on the 38th floor, paving the way for a second traumatic experience for our hero. The cables gave away after a sound described by witnesses as a gunshot thundered all around. Poor Betty, still strapped down, plummeted 75 stories in some unforeseen freefall. The severed cables fell first, which piled in a string-like spiral on the floor of the shaft, cushioning her impact. Simultaneously, the compressed air in the shaft reportedly slowed just enough to save her life. Rescuers raced to the scene and by some miracle found Oliver alive. She was carefully cut out of the mangled death trap she used to work in every day. Keep in mind this was over 1,000 feet. Despite all that, she recovered within weeks, earning the Guinness World Record for the longest elevator fall survived in history, a title she holds to this day. She lived a quiet life after the incident, choosing to focus on her family in Fort Smith, Arkansas. She died in 1999, surrounded by loved ones. Ming Kwang Chen, a delivery man for a Bronx restaurant called the Happy Dragon, set out to deliver a large order of curried shrimp with onion and shrimp fried rice to a high-rise apartment building at the beginning of April 2005. Except he didn't come back. His co-workers freaked out when they found his bike chained up in front of the 38-story apartment building of Tracy Towers. Multiple delivery men for Chinese restaurants had been murdered in New York in the years leading up to this incident, either for their money or food, so I imagine they assumed the worst. For 3 days, police searched for Chen, going door to door to the 871 apartments and sending cadaver-detecting dogs to the nearby park and cemetery. But turns out he was right under their nose, trapped in an express elevator in the building he was sent to deliver food to. He was stuck in a 4 by 6.5 foot cab after making his final delivery, with no food or water to speak of. 80 hours later, building security figured out he was stuck in there, and firefighters were called to get Chen out. He was stuck between the 3rd and 4th floors of the 38-story building. The elevator malfunctioned due to a broken selector tape, a component that tracks the unit's position, causing it to halt. Now, this case on the surface should raise some eyebrows. A building official stated that the elevator's security camera was working the entire duration Chen was trapped. Why did it take them days to realize one of their elevators was busted? The official elaborated, claiming a language barrier likely compounded his troubles. Chen was an undocumented immigrant from the Fujian province in southeastern China, and spoke very little English. In fact, he apparently tried to tell his rescuers how long he had been trapped by circling his watch dial with his finger numerous times. Through an interpreter during an interview, Chen claims he yelled constantly when the elevator stalled, and when he failed to pry open the doors, he tried the emergency intercom. He says that his calls for help were answered 5 or 6 times over the weekend, and this is apparently where the miscommunications began. When describing one of these intercom interactions, Chen says, "She said something, and I couldn't understand, and she couldn't understand me." The company that manages the building contradicts these statements. They claim they had no record of any of Chen's pleas for help until the day he was rescued. But take the company's word with a grain of salt, because as of the date this happened, the 12 elevators at Tracy Towers have a long history of issues, racking up 17 violations by city inspectors in just 3 years. Citations have listed problems, including illegal emergency stop switches, inoperative car position operators, and inaccessible emergency exits. Chen was unharmed when firefighters lowered the car and freed him, and he quickly downed a bottle of water. He was taken to a medical center and was treated for mild to moderate dehydration. The whole incident even inspired the creation of the opera Stuck Elevator, which dramatizes Chen's experience and the broader issues of immigration. So maybe next time you get stalled 5 minutes in your apartment building, maybe remember this video because it could be 5 days. Thanks for watching.